So when I'm about to give you a whole bunch of tips and tricks and advice about how to live with this disease. And a reasonable question for you to ask is, on what are you basing your information? Why do you believe what you believe? How did you learn what you're about to tell us? And so let me just answer that and say that we developed, after we built this rating scale, we developed a study where for the last 7 years now, every 6 months, we send a survey to over 2,000 people with Parkinson's disease around the world. And we ask them, with actually all forms of Parkinson's, and we ask them, who are you, how are you, and what are you doing? And then my team and I wrote a statistical code to ask, who are the people who aren't progressing and what are they doing differently than everybody else? The study design is called the positive deviance model, and it's based on this idea that in a group of people with Parkinson's disease, there are going to be some outliers. There are going to be people doing unusually poorly and unusually well. And what we want to do is study those groups, and whatever those people who are fast progressing are doing, I want you to not do that. Whatever these behaviors are that are common to the people with seemingly benign disease, very, very slowly progressing or non-progressing disease, what are those people doing? And I'm going to tell you to do that. And that type of research, it's called a natural history study. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell us why. We don't know why people who exercise have a slower rate of progression. But clear as day, our research tells us the more exercise people do, the slower their disease progresses. So that was the study that we designed, and most of the information I'm going to give to you over the course of these videos, especially about things like exercise and diet and supplements, really come down to what we've learned from you. And I actually love, that's the other thing I love about this study design, is instead of the neurologist or the researcher having an idea, designing a study, trying it, and eventually working its way to people, what I like about this study design is the patients are in charge. It's patients teaching us. It's big data. We've got thousands of people who tell us their stories, tell us what supplements they're taking, what foods they're eating. And what we do is we get all this data back and we can start to sift through it and say, hey, look, it looks like people taking fish oil are doing better than people not taking fish oil. And then other researchers can come in and try and figure out, what does that mean? What is the mechanism by which fish oil is helping? Is it really helping as well as we think? What if we do a study? And then we can kind of work backwards. But instead of going from this academic, eventually reaching people perspective, the study design that we're using here, it's called CAM, CARE, and PD, is taking people, the patients with Parkinson's disease, and working backwards to eventually reach the researchers and physicians. So you guys are really the ones teaching us what works and what doesn't. So the first step in messing with these data, or the first step in analyzing these data, was to figure out if the scale that we were using works. And the short answer is it does. It works better than I even hoped it would. We compared the results of the PRO-PD with years since diagnosis. Obviously, for this to accurately reflect progression, the scale has to get worse as time goes on. This does. People's PRO-PD scores increase at a rate of about 38 points per year. The other thing that's really nice about this scale is it correlates really nicely with all of the other existing scales, with the UPDRS, the Hoehn-Yahr, the non-motor symptom score, the Parkinson's disease questionnaire. There are a whole bunch of outcome measures that we use in Parkinson's disease research, and the PRO-PD correlates nicely with all of those. And then most importantly, the other thing that's really nice about the PRO-PD score, as I talked about earlier, is that it correlates with quality of life. Like I said before, if you're below 500, people tend to say their quality of life is excellent. Between 500 and 1,000, it's good. And it gets worse as your scores go up. And so here's this, we now have this rating scale that reflects the patient experience. You don't need to go to a physician to get your score. You can do it from home. You can do it remotely. Send your physician a copy of the scores. And you can track it yourself and watch your symptoms improve or decrease and kind of roll up your sleeves and tackle things that are particularly problematic.